Hi, Laura. Hi, John. So glad you could join us. Nina, yay. Hi, Laura. Good to see you. Carolyn, thanks for jumping on the call. Really appreciate it. Hi, Michael. Marco. Adam. Um,
What's the exact time now?
I'll say Adam before, because you're listed as Olivia, by the way. But you're not Olivia.
6:30 yet, or?
No, it's 6:29, Elizabeth.
Oh, that's not bad. We'll wait till 6:31.
Sherry, how are you? I'm going to jump out and get my tea in a minute. Good to see you, Michael. Hi, Harold.
I think we're waiting for Anthony too.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for jumping on the call.
Kevin, are you our host?
Yes, I am your host tonight.
Oh, great. As soon as you see Anthony, can you let us know?
Sure.
Do you see him sign in?
Oh, he signed in, but he may not be.
He's not on the list.
No,
Are you
he's here.
here, Anthony?
He's here. I'm gonna unmute him.
Oh, good. Okay, well, we've got an assembly of 21. I think we should start. I want to welcome everybody who's come. This is the February Zoning and Development Committee meeting. I'm Elizabeth Ashby, a co-chair, and Anthony Cohn and Sharon Pope Marshall are also co-chairs. And before we get started, we'll hand it over to Kevin to explain how we play the game here.
All right, so hi everyone, welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting, except for the committee co-chairs, Anthony, Sharon, Elizabeth. As we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. they will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll get started, and the first item is City of Yes, and we're now at the housing bit, and co-chair Anthony will introduce it to us.
Okay, good evening. Now I'm going to, can I share? Oh, Kevin, will you let me share my screen?
Yes, I will turn that on right now.
Okay. There it is. Okie doke, I think. This is where I want to go. And I want to, hang on one second. And oops. And I want to share. All right, can you all see that? See my screen?
No.
Of course, I can't
Not
see
yet.
any of you.
No.
No? Okay, wait a minute. Let me see what I'm doing wrong. You should be able to, but I don't know why not. All right, hang on one second. It worked last time. How are we doing now?
We're there. Hurrah.
Okay, very good. Okay, now hang on one second while I get this bit up. All right. Good evening. This will be a brief introduction to the first part of the City of Yes housing proposal. Basically, we're going to go through in some detail the first two bits, so that at least those people who are on the call can intelligently speak at the land use meeting when it comes up. At least some of us will know what's going on. I'll send a PDF of this to Kevin so that he can put it in the minutes so that you can refresh your memories. Basically, what we're going through are the first portions of the medium and high density R6 to R10 zoning changes that are part of the that will be part of the City of Yes. Just as a quick reminder, and a kind of a graphic different graphic explanations of Community District 8 rather. And I apologize to the people in the, let's say, above about 90th Street, close to Central Park, and the very southern tip of Roosevelt Island. This actually consists of four bits of four sheets from the zoning maps. And the first thing you notice is that there are lots of little zoning areas, and the gray in the zoning maps represents special districts. This does not talk about landmarks or landmark districts. This is literally just the special zoning districts. And on the right is all of Community District 8. And this is the sort of official land use map that describes the various uses that we have in our community. And you can see that the sort of yellow brown, kind of the yellow, kind of grayish, yellow and almost orange, are in fact residential uses in those blocks and those buildings. And just one very quick refresher. This was actually in the last show, and it represents the reason behind, or at least the ostensible reason behind City of Yes housing, and that is the basic notion was to make small changes throughout the city that would then yield more housing spread somewhat unequally, actually, throughout the city. You'll notice the second highlighted line says that while all neighborhoods must do their part, different neighborhoods call for different approaches. And it's not altogether clear whether or not they've managed to achieve that in their proposals, but as we look through it, we'll at least see what's pertinent to us and touch on what is pertinent elsewhere in the city. And so next. So the basic proposals are there are 4 big buckets and several smaller ones into which they fall. The first has to do with increasing affordable and supportive housing floor areas. Currently, the city has bonuses in floor area for different kinds of supportive housing, principally housing for seniors, and also for affordable housing. And so the idea of this first proposal is, and this is sort of a general comment, this component seeks to simplify and rationalize the approach to floor area ratio for AIRS, which are those supportive housing and other forms of affordable and supportive housing, and provide a consistent preference for these critical uses for each zoning district across the current patchwork of zoning geographies. All you have to do is think about that zoning map to understand. Okay, most of this information comes directly, at least directly, from the proposal, from the City of Yes housing proposal. So this first piece, this A.1A, which is more floor area for affordable and supportive housing. The point being that the light orange are districts that already have existing preferential floor area for seniors. And the idea is that those districts, plus the districts in dark orange, will have the newly proposed preferential FAR treatment. And we'll get to what that's called in a second. And what that's going to be referred to, it says so over on the right, Universal Affordability Preference Framework. The point is that seniors currently get higher FAR, and the idea is to spread that higher FAR throughout the city by boosting the floor area in essentially all districts, and we're going to get into what that means. Community District 8, which is inside the dark blue circle, has most of the district is in fact does not have preferential FAR at this point, and we'll see why in a minute. So the idea is to provide new preferential FAR, and if you look, this is all of the R6 through R10 zones. And most of our district is effectively R10 or R8B. And there's R8B, and what is proposed there, because they are proposing a 20% increase if the developer includes 20% of affordable or supportive housing. And so you can see there that what it does is it takes the FAR, which is currently 4, and bumps it up to 4.8. So there is an increase, a slight, not insubstantial, but a slight increase. When we go to the R10 and R10A, which are also reasonably represented, there is effectively no change from the current zoning. In the next piece of this is to streamline the zoning and expand opportunities for affordable housing. And the idea is to replace inclusionary housing designated areas, IHDA, and R10 inclusionary housing, which is R10IH, programs with a preferential zoning framework described above. So the point is that these two designations will disappear. And the idea, and you can see that in Community District 8, we only have a little bit of the R10 districts and equivalents that are currently part of that R10 IH program. And so the idea is that those will, in fact, everything will be subject to the previous rules. And you can see here that we have some R9, but basically what they're saying is that what is now in place will be removed and will be and all R10 districts will be treated the same. All R9 districts will more or less be treated the same. Yeah. Well, R9 and R9A won't, but and then R9X and R9D will be the same. It's a little confusing, but the point is that two programs disappear because they are being replaced by a simplification of the zoning. Oops, that slide wasn't supposed to be there. Okay, the next is adjust building envelopes. That's 1.1D if you're following along. And the point here is this is where we start to look at what the effect will be. It's easy enough to say that we're going to add 0.8 to the R8B and nothing to the R10. And here's R8B. And the effect on that will be the current zoning shows a street wall of maximum street wall height of 65 feet and a total building height after a setback of 15 feet of 75 feet. The new base height, the street wall, will be 85 feet, and the new overall height of the building will be 105 feet. So the building potentially could be 30 feet taller in an R8B zone, and the base height could be 20 feet higher than it is today. And if you look at the R9s, R9 is going to have a greater height, more or less, and the R10s, the R10 on narrow streets will get taller, but not on the wide streets. So the point is that in order to accommodate the additional floor area, potentially, there are going to be changes to the bulk. Now, these won't happen in market rate housing. They'll only happen if there is that 20% affordable housing. So this is a typical R8B block. R8B extends more or less from the corner of my building on 77th Street to sort of in the middle of this guy, closer to 2nd Avenue. Those are the the commercial zone, which basically is an R10 overlay. There's a big building going up here on the opposite corner. What I'm supposing here, just to show you what the effect is, this is what a current zoning building, fully building out the envelope, although this would be in excess of the allowable floor area, frankly. So the current zoning here is R8B. It's a contextual zone. The lot area of this particular one's 100 by 100. I just not randomly picked that. FAR is 4, which gives an allowable floor area of 40,000 square feet. The street wall height is 65 feet here. The setback, first setback is 15 feet, and the total height is 75 feet. And then the rear yard has to be 30 feet. That's not changing. So that's a new building fit into the fabric of an R8B zone. Under the new zoning, and I apologize because I made a mistake here. Under the new zoning, this would be the building, and what's in red, except there's another piece of it here, is what is allowable under the increased floor area. And so just going over it quickly, it's the same lot. It's the FAR is 4, and you add 0.8 to that. It's 4.8 is the new FAR. The allowable floor area then becomes 48,000 square feet, 8,000 of which, or just given the configuration of this building, not quite 2 of these floors, or not quite 1 or 1.5 of these guys, would be affordable. Street wall height is not 75, it'll be 85. The total building height, 105 feet. So this building will be in the R8B zone, provided someone can get the floor area allowed, full floor area allowed, will be considerably taller than most of the fabric of the Upper East Side of the R8B zones. The next section is a change, in effect, is a change in use and classification. And this is important. I know the 91st Street project came up again at Health and Seniors and Committee last week. And there have been always, and were initially, serious objections to the way that was zoned. That is in a C8-4 zone, which does not allow residential uses. And as you can see from the first line there, affordable housing and supportive housing are classified as use group 2 residential, and supportive housing is classified as use group 3 community facility use, although not in that case. They were asking for residential. Now, the point is that to allow all of that to be classified as use group 2 or use group 3, which is to say that the one of the 2 basic zoning objections to that kind of project would disappear. And I think the other thing that's important about that is that the zoning resolution of 1961 did not take into account any issues relating to homelessness, did not really take into account any issues relating to any kind of long-term supportive housing. And so the point is that this change will allow those types of buildings in more areas, more parts of the city, by essentially changing the way the use groups work, or in fact including it in a residential use group, where in fact these are residential buildings. And then the next little piece here is that there is a requirement and these are in non-contextual districts, and we have some R7-2. There can be a special permit. And so the point is that the special permit will allow an even greater increase. And you can see the R7-2, we are in all of Manhattan virtually as the Manhattan core. And so this would allow another increase in floor area for these types of buildings. Now, this is about the next little piece. So that first piece is 20% for supportive or affordable housing, changes to bulk, and then other little things nibbling around the edges of problems in a good way, I think. Dwelling unit factor limits the number of dwelling units on a zoning lot. And that's part of the zoning resolution, as we'll see a little later. For developments that use all of their available floor area, DUF functions as a minimum average unit size that effectively mandates the addition of 2, 3, or more bedroom apartments in new developments. This is city planning's rationale for this change. Going on, if a development provides smaller units such as studios, it must also provide larger units such as 2 or 3 bedroom units to meet the minimum average unit size. And so here we have, again, we're in that dark blue circle. Within the inner transit-oriented development area, which is pretty much, well, we are, including the Manhattan core. The idea is to eliminate dwelling unit factor within that. So there it is. The idea is that unit size would be governed by something other than an abstract number in the zoning resolution. And you can see that dwelling unit factor would be eliminated. And so the idea here, that was the first bit, reduce and simplify dwelling unit factor outside the inner transit-oriented development area. So that's not us. The dwelling unit factor is mostly, this will mostly have to do with less dense, the lower density dwelling unit factors. For instance, one will be introduced into R1 through R5. From everywhere in Community District 8, the current dwelling unit factor is 680 square feet, which means that the average size of an apartment has to be 680 square feet. The proposal is that it will be 500 square feet. The idea being that that will naturally allow for more small apartments. Now, the second piece of that is to we'll go to D, which is in fact the relates to us, which is to remove zoning obstacles to rooming units and shared housing models. So I think that one of the things that's important here is that this is an attempt to reintroduce something equivalent to a single room occupancy. So for instance, rooming units, in fact, are rooming houses where there is a common kitchen, but you have each individual has their own room. Those were eliminated largely because of systemic abuse. And I think the notion is to try and at least bring the idea back, and also shared housing models. It's unclear exactly. Oops. Oop. It's unclear exactly how that will go. I'm going to stop here so that we can begin to speak to you all. I'll stop my share, I think, and then we can get people to ask questions about where we are. Next time, we're going to talk about the expanding of the quality housing program, which effectively will make every district, every new building in the city a quality housing building. I'll talk about the quality housing program, but also it will, and that will in fact simplify the residential zoning in our district and in every district. There were also implications in that for NYCHA campuses, and we'll talk about that as well. And then there are a number of smaller, like parking, but smaller proposals within this sort of giant umbrella. And I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to say one thing and then start to there. Okay. And I know Rita's first. But I just wanted to say that I think that this represents a kind of attempt by city planning, by the Department of City Planning, to try and rebuild the zoning resolution without throwing it away and starting over. Some of the things that we're going to talk about tomorrow are less, frankly, about creating more affordable housing or creating more housing than they are about simplifying and modernizing the zoning resolution. But we'll talk about that more next time. So, first, Rita.
Anthony, thank you so much. It's almost as clear as mud, but you have forged away. I have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, though, they seem to have measured every inch and have appropriated every inch and have removed every inch. Have they talked about, affordable housing? We've been saying this for years. Affordable for who? Have they listed what they determine to be affordable? Or are we putting everybody in smaller units and charging them more? I think that the part of almost going back to single room occupancy is absolutely foolish. It means we didn't learn anything from when we had it, and it doesn't work, and it isn't good, and it isn't good for the people. So that it comes up, I hope that will get voted down immediately. But in your travels, have you heard what they mean by affordable?
Certainly nothing specific here. Yes. Wait, Adam wants to say something. He's wildly gesturing.
It's 80% AMI. That's what they define affordable as.
Okay.
But there was some talk, wasn't there some talk though about a broader range going down lower?
For UAP, the idea is that anything that will qualify for the 20% is anything that's under 80% AMI.
Under 80%. Okay.
If there's other programs, I think that's different. But I think for UAP, it's standard. It's supposed to be 80% AMI or under.
Is that 80%?
It's the old inclusionary. It's the inclusionary number. What
Is
that's
that
defined as inclusionary.
is that 80% of the AMI what the government says it is, or
That's
is
right.
it the AMI? Because our AMI takes in parts of Westchester, which is very
It's
upscale.
the HUD AMI, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean that's my understanding.
Okay.
And I think frankly, one of the problems is that in most of our district, the only way it will be very difficult for people to get to the new floor area without a lot of shaping and sculpting of the buildings. Just given the sort of crude numbers. Okay, Michelle.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for the presentation. Is this suggestion to move to 500 feet, is this part of the proposal where they want bathrooms in the hallway? Is this when they
Yeah,
go?
I mean, yeah, they want to allow that. They want to allow that by
But in order to get to 500-foot apartment, I mean, it's like living in a hamster cage. You would have to eliminate the bathroom. I don't know what you had mentioned communal kitchens. I don't remember seeing that specifically, but is that also specifically mentioned as an option in the whole City of Yes housing program?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I was just going to say that, yes, 500 square feet is not a very big apartment. I had a studio for a couple of years on the Upper West Side that was maybe 500 square feet.
And you were 19. And you were 19.
No. Unfortunately, I was 29.
Well, okay.
But I think, and you do bring up a good point that has to do not even so much with reviving the SROs, but I think that there's a lesson that we can. It's something we have to ask ourselves: who is this for? Is this proposal for families who do not need 500 square foot apartments, or is this proposal for people right out of college and it's their first apartment and their first job and their first year in New York City? And I think that there is. When I started out in architecture, the problem with housing was that apartments were too small. And if you look at buildings that were built 40 years ago, right? Marco's laughing. He's right. I'm right. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they're one bedrooms and studios. I mean, they're big studios, but one bedrooms and studios. And so with a couple of two bedrooms thrown in. And the fact of the matter is that those apartments were too small, which is partly why people left the city and moved to houses in the suburbs. And that was the kind of imagining. And as people have, in fact, decided to stay here and raise their kids here, it becomes more difficult to find affordable, and I don't mean affordable with the 80% AMI, I mean the sort of workforce affordable housing. It becomes harder and harder to find big enough apartments that people can afford. I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you, but it was,
No,
I thought,
I value your comments. But here's the point. Number one, your point is the good one of who are they building this for? And which then goes to the point, how much of this are they building? Because how much of this are they going to permit or encourage or allow? Because depending on how much of this they build, they're basically shaping the community. If they build this in great proportion because they think they're housing ever more people, they're not necessarily housing more people. They're housing more people separately. That's different. So that this could promote a transient community, a starter out community, which we're happy to have, but in the correct proportion. But you are also, depending on the proportion in which this is built, you are lessening the available housing for what could and would become your tax base. So this city will not thrive and be able to support the services that it would like to offer and thrive with the wrong, let me say, I don't know, over, because I don't know what they're proposing, but with the wrong percentage of this kind of housing. Because typically those who would occupy 500 square feet with a bathroom in the hall will not be even a middle income owner. It'll be a person not high income, pay little or no taxes. Okay, so let's say you have a building with 20 of these apartments. You have housed 20 individual people. But if you had interspersed, if you had 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, in a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom apartment, you would also be housing 20 people. So I don't know who this is targeted to, and I submit to you that neither do they.
yes, I think you're right.
Somebody came up with this. Now, that's one piece of it. So to me, this makes very little sense. The other piece of it is it our aim to lower our standard of living? I mean, is that the point? To convert housing in 2024 going forward to the kind of housing that you had on the Lower East Side at the turn of the 20th century? Is that the aim of the city of Yes? I mean, everything I have seen, I hate to be a naysayer, or I shouldn't say I hate to be, but I mean, but I haven't seen anything particularly worthwhile in everything I've read about this. I don't see that it solves the problem that they want, because it takes away too much from everything else. So it's crazy to me. Now, if they wanted to really convert to affordable housing, and this is Marco's idea in one area, he'll speak to it more than me, but R10A housing is 210 feet tall, has a bonus of 20% height for inclusionary housing. Isn't that basically what they're looking for here? Why are they reinventing the wheel? And with R10A, there's a mandatory requirement of 6 apartments per floor. And I'm assuming that it's not 6 500 feet. Elizabeth, is that a wrong statistic, Elizabeth? I thought that was the case. If it isn't,
no,
it
is
isn't.
apparently not. And
It's not. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You're fine. Scratch that bit of information. You'll elaborate when it's your turn, but let me just finish the thought. The point is, I don't know if they're reinventing the wheel here, but it's of tremendous concern. Now, this 500 feet that they are permitting is also going to address the issue in the suburbs, or should I say one and two family homes. Because the other part of this is they are proposing to allow those people who occupy a family home to build additional small housing on their little housing lot. Now, I don't know what a typical housing lot is, but what is it like in a Queens neighborhood, 60 by 80, or, I mean,
It depends.
depends. But I mean, if you're lining up housing, all right, maybe something has 100. How do they specify how far away does from the prime dwelling
Yes.
does it have to be? How far is the setback from
Michelle,
road?
we're going to talk about that particular
Good.
aspect of this next time.
Okay, so I'm jumping ahead. All right. Well, those are my comments about this. So
Because you read it.
I don't. This is not appealing to me, nor to me does it solve anything. And it eliminates income, and it doesn't house more people. It houses more single people, but not more people. Thank you for listening.
Right. I think this is an attempt to create and I don't know whether it does or not. I don't know. Create a more attractive, a series of small initiatives to create a more attractive environment for development. Well, Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I think you have some public people over there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, it's your choice. Your choice. Okay. I would like to see if you don't mind, I would like to share one slide. Is it possible or not?
I'm okay with it.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me see. Where is my slides? Okay. Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. While everybody's seeing that, let me ask a couple of questions. The first question that I have for everybody is anybody against building housing? I don't think so. Everybody's in favor to build affordable, build housing. Is anybody in favor of demolishing housing? I don't think because everybody's in agreement to demolish affordable housing. Does anybody know what is the deficit of affordable housing? Nobody knows. The only thing I can say is in 2019, HPD declared that have 1.1 million applicants for the housing lottery. And then I read somewhere that the deficit is 700,000 dwelling units. Mayor Adams, at the beginning of his administration, he said that he's going to build 500,000 affordable units.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the deficit? We had to establish first what is our problem. So on the other hand, we can see it that the community board 8 is the most community board that has been contributed in the city in housing because we are the densest
Mm-hmm.
in the nation. So so far we have been doing more than we supposed to do that. If you compare with the Upper West Side, because they are claiming that we just built a big infrastructure, the Q line, where the Upper West Side have 5 lines and have less population, and we have just only with the Q line, we have more population than 4 lines. And so the point is, right here is what they tried to do is they said everybody has to share. In that direction, go directly what you has been mentioned, Anthony. And what I did is the information that I have in the screen you can see clearly that they are planning, their goal is to target the RAB district. That is the target. And their target is, this is information, the top part is not my information. That is information from the city of Yes, which match what you just said. But the situation is they planning to in reality try to encourage to demolish affordable housing existing in the mid blocks, so they can build 47 apartments and 11 affordable housing. Now, if you see in the bottom, you took your building, but I took a regular building on the Upper East Side. As you see it, there are 4 buildings, and in 4 buildings, there are 72 dwelling units. And all of them are affordable. And they want to build, let me see, the number is not visible for me, but they are planning to build 56, and they want to build 11 affordable housing. What are we doing right here? Rather to increase affordable housing, we are reducing affordable housing. Now, for the 56 dwelling market rate, do you think that a developer is going to build affordable housing with the rate that they mentioned? If you use the floor area factor, 680 to 550, that's what I have in the records. Is going to increase? Yes. But the developer is going to do that? No. I did a study. In all the buildings, no developer build 100% of the density. All of them, they build from 50% to 24%. And one developer, they build 0%. So the problem is, first, they try to attack us that we have to provide more. And we already did so far. And the issue right here is, we have a good position in the community board 8, 210. They want to modify the 208, which is mandatory quality of housing. And the quality of housing, there are several issues, and increase the standard of living in the whole city. So all the developers that I study, they love to go for quality of housing. And they are right, by the way, because they produce the indoor quality much better than the existing housing. So the issue right here, what I perceive is, this target, the mid blocks, the RAB, is just only is to give more benefit to the developer, because the developer, they have the obligation to don't go beyond the maximum dwelling units in that case. The developer, they don't care, because nobody controls the lowest density. That is the problem on the Upper East Side. And that is the target that we had to go in that direction, because all the developers, they build at 50 or less percent. Let me give you one case. The development on First Avenue and 79th Street. This developer demolished 79 affordable units. Guess how many units built? Luxury, 0. Affordable, 0. They built a community facility. Nobody said, we have enough community facilities. Why I said it's enough? Because we have a corridor of hospitals lower than 72nd Street on York Avenue. And not only that, we have a corridor. Constantly, we provide plenty of square footage for them, thousands. Not only that, they have a free air rights on the FDR. And they still having a lot of square footage over there. They holding that square footage, and they are building in the rest of the city or in the rest of our community. That is our problem. We had to tackle in that direction. We want to contribute. Let's go contribute. Let's go establish the 210 limits. That's the position of the community board. And then we can put an extra 2. You want to have an extra 20? Okay, fine. But the point is, We need to have a city of yes that fits our needs, that we would like to contribute. The idea of them that what they are proposing is basically is spatial segregation by income. They want to push out those residents that are poor out because they don't serve it to be right here. And this development that you see in the lower part, that is the traditional buildings in the mid block, except your building, Anthony. But that is the traditional. You go everywhere in the mid block. That's what it is, and they have 72 affordable units, while they are proposing 56 market rate and 11 affordable units. What's going on? I think it's wrong, this proposal. What we have to start thinking is how we're going to present our recommendations, because we would like to contribute to build more affordable housing. And the contribution is we start for the 210, and then we said, well, we can build an extra 20%, or we can give you 20 feet extra. And we have to build quality of housing. And quality of housing, there are several factors that include in most of the buildings is, yes, it is required to have 6 apartments in each floor, because they don't want to have very long corridors. That is the quality of housing. They want to have also in the corridor, they don't want to have at the ends. They want to have windows. Why? Because when the people go to the corridor, they want to feel that is light outside. So there are several other factors that is contributing in that part. I think this example, it complements your presentation, Anthony. Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Marco.
Marco, I'm sorry. I just had a couple of questions for Marco. I agree with almost everything that you said, but I'm curious, and I also want to say that I appreciate your flexibility in terms of looking at how we could best improve our position regarding the 210 height limit. And I wanted to tell you that that's something that we'll maybe can take a look at in April, as a matter of fact, or maybe as soon as March. But I'm curious to know. I'm curious, although there's that flexibility to the 20% that you referred to for affordable housing vis-a-vis our 210 height limit proposal, the board's proposal. I'm wondering if we need to be even more flexible, because the city planning certainly has said that another proposal with a higher limit above 210, city planning also decided not to move forward with that community-based proposal as well. So I'm curious to know how you think we could be effective with just 20% or remaining with the 210 height limit proposal.
The point is very simple. Look, with the money that the state provide to us, $25 billion, you're not going to build much. You need the developers. And the developers, you have to give something, because the developers, they don't provide welfare to nobody. And I agree with them. So the issue right here is, on the other hand, we have a position on the community board, 210. That is coming my idea. And we cannot move that. But the other situation is, yes, we can negotiate something. And I think I'm talking by myself. I'm not talking for nobody else. It has to be very clear. We can negotiate that, but in order to reach something reasonable, so we had to stop an excessive, super tall buildings that they are no energy efficient. And I haven't studied about that. I can demonstrate that. And they are building right now. You can go over there. All of them, I think is more likely because they are millionaire, They can pay the penalties of no compliance with the local law 97. I think that's what it is. But we have to keep in mind that all of us, we have a moral obligation to preserve this planet for other generations. So the point is, yes, we can have a conversation. Yes, we did a presentation with city planning. City planning came with, probably we're going to discuss later, and came with the idea to increase the floor area ratio. Well, we can talk that, but the point is we had to start from something. I think to start as 210 is the right thing. And then obviously we can keep moving and have a conclusion and recommendation. And the major point what I perceive is while the deficit, whatever it is the deficit, is increasing every single day because every single day the developer they demolish affordable housing. So on one side you build, you're happy, you said, oh, we built 12,000, but on the other hand, they are demolishing. I found that on the Upper East Side, they demolish, for every new affordable housing, they demolish 9. So if we're going at that rate, we're going to create a rich neighborhood and a poor neighborhood. And I think it's wrong. I think we have to be inclusive. We have to create opportunities for all. We have to build luxury. We have to build middle income housing, and we have to build for low income housing. All of them we have to consider in this part. And I agree. Yes, we can talk that. And I think we are open. We can organize, well, I shouldn't say that, but we can talk with your organization and see what grounds we can have and we can work together in that direction. I think it's good. This dialogue is the best.
Yeah, thank you, Marco.
You're welcome.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Marco. And now we have, I'm gonna, I feel guilty about letting Michelle and Marco speak, but we have a couple of non-board members, so I'm going to let them kind of jump the line, and then I promise Elizabeth, then you're next after them. So we have Dylan, and if you, yeah, there he is. Okay.
I just wanted to touch on a few points that have been brought up so far. Like, for example, there was some discussion of, I think this, I was actually referring to you, Anthony, where you used to live in a very small studio. And the question was, oh, but that was when you were 19. And I am not 19, but I'm probably closer to 19. And I think that it's important to build housing for 19-year-olds. And I think it's important to build a wide, diverse set of housing. And I understand that for probably the vast majority of the people on this call would not like to live in an SRO. But for some people who are younger, lower income, that is their best option. And I know there was also a discussion of, what kinds of people do we want living in our neighborhood from like a tax-based perspective. And I believe strongly that we should be welcoming to all kinds of people, even if they're not going to contribute as much in taxes because they're potentially lower income. We should provide affordable housing. And I feel like we spent so much time talking about potential, income segregation or the need for affordable housing. And then we raised concerns that the people who would be moving into those SROs were not contributing enough to a tax base. The last bit I want to mention is that I previously lived at a different location on the Upper East Side. I moved from 82nd to 89th, and on 82nd, I lived in a 3-bedroom. And I lived in a 3-bedroom with 2 other, young people. And so as some of these kind of cheaper, smaller studio options become available, it's wrong to think of that as just, okay, well, that's not good for families. Because those kinds of smaller, affordable units for young people will draw out a lot of young people who have lived together in, 3 bedrooms with roommates, and will create more open areas for people with families. Most of the young people I know are living with at least one roommate in a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. So I want to just emphasize that I like a lot of these proposals. I'm a fan of City of Yes. Particularly as it relates to housing. But I think we need to allow housing for all people, and that includes encouraging affordable housing, that includes encouraging 3 bedrooms, and that also includes allowing single or SROs. So thank you very much. And I know there are lots of concerns, but I do just want to voice my support as a member of the community for housing of yes, the city of yes for housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. And somebody dropped. I think we're all. Oh, well, Elaine Walsh.
Thank you. A couple of points to the last speaker. In the 60s and the 50s, when people were finishing college, they all shared 2 bedrooms with 4 people or 6. This is how you started out. You weren't guaranteed your own apartment with amenities, etc. So let's move past it, because the group now of privileged people in what are we in, the 2020s? You're no different than we were in the 60s. But the question I had listening to everything, and I'm tired, and I think, Marco, thank you, you've done fantastic work. What is the research that the city has used to come up with the plan? I've seen no data, no justification. Tonight's presentation were filled with information, research, hard research that can convince one to rethink things. The city has proposed nothing, bunch of ideas from some city people, planning people who are listening to their mayor. I'm sorry, I'm being very honest about this. And it's upsetting. The other day, yesterday, I walked by 77th Street, down, not between 3rd and 2nd, but 2nd and 1st. What a lovely block. And it was the R8Bs. It really, I was like, this is what we are about. And what has happened, and some people talked about fair share. We've done our fair share. The Q line does not just service people living around the 86th Street or 72nd or 63rd Street stations. It serves the other boroughs and the West Side. We have our fair share, and I had this discussion with city planning years ago. You want to ask us what we've done in our neighborhood? I'll identify it. And I started to, and they stepped back because they knew they were wrong. So I don't know why it keeps coming up for our community. We are the most dense. But we should also point out that all of the affordable we should have had, we don't have because of the deals that were cut with the developers and the politicians. And the other boroughs are ruining the fact that they're not happy now. We would have loved it. We have, I call it workforce housing. I don't like the word affordable. It's workforce housing. So I think I'd like to see us go back to the city and say to them, could you give us the data and the background and the research that justifies what you're now presenting? Because it falls in the face of what we know on the ground and the research that has been done by your fantastic community board members. So I leave it there, but this going on and on and on about a 400 square foot, 500, a bathroom here, etc. Let me tell you, the homeless population wants their own room. They don't want to share the bathroom. They want a kitchen, okay? That's what they're asking for. And they refuse to go into some of the things that the city is offering for them, because if they hold out, they will get what they want. And I did a lot of work prior to J51s in the 70s, looking at the SROs, and they were a disgrace, and it was a moneymaker for the owners of that property. And we are going to continue to have the developers and the owners of these properties make a fortune. Ask the developer on 91st Street what he's getting paid to build that welcome center, which, by the way, is still in violation if they go to a safe haven. And ask what they're getting, and the fact that it's a maximum 10-year lease because they're going to turn it over to a hotel. How much money did he make from the city to do this? And we have the same problem on the west side. The city needs to begin to take their property and then have a developer do it, not to sell, but to build it and not make the profits that they're doing. This is what's happening all over. You want to know where your money is? I can tell you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. The stuff drives me absolutely out of my mind at this point.
So Elaine, you're right about the developers, really pocketing the money. So I think the issue with SROs, and some people, including myself, remember when they were around. Is it less about the SRO itself and more about the lack of maintenance? Because they really allowed, the developers not to they did not require the developers or the owners to maintain their properties and their spaces. I mean, I think
Sharon,
that
I
was
don't know
the
what
issue
question
more than anything else. I was
Sharon,
wondering what your thoughts are.
Sharon, I don't understand the question. You had private landowners that had SROs. They let it, there was no real oversight. There are health regulations, blah, blah, blah.
I agree.
They were allowed to do it. The developers.
So on that point, is it less about the SRO and more about the fact that there was not enough maintenance? They did not force those owners.
No, that was private housing. It's more about what people are going to make as a profit for moving into these. I don't know what they're going to do now. The other was a private developer. There was no oversight. The advocates complained, etc. But the SROs were a perfect place for those who were being discharged from that mental health facilities because of the mental health law that said deinstitutionalize. So you had people moving into what was availability of housing.
So let me just flip the question just for 1 second. If there was oversight, if there was I'm speaking hypothetically. If we had oversight in 2024, would you be opposed to SROs?
Yes, I don't think that's the way people want to live, and I don't know why we would go back rather than have apartments. There's going to be no oversight. What in SROs that house whom? These are private individuals who have chosen to rent and live there. It'd be like somebody going into your building and having oversight. What is our oversight? Health, heating. There are certain legal regulations on FR, local law 11, etc. But individual private owners don't have oversight. If you're talking about where a developer or a landowner has a contract with the city to provide services to a certain population, that's a different thing. That's very different. But that's not what the conversation tonight is. It's about, how can we get more housing? Look, on 82nd and 3rd, we do have 82nd, 81st, 82nd, I think it is, an apartment building, about 6 stories, got bathrooms in the hallway. We still have it. We had some in 70th Street off 3rd also. They're around, but those are privately owned. The government doesn't oversee it. You're talking about oversight where there would be contracts to provide housing for those who are in the homeless situation. Okay, that's very different. And in the 60s and 70s, where we had the SROs, it was the advocates that kept pushing. And in the end, the developers loved the idea of the removing of the residents there because they made a fortune in renovation. And I would never, ever, by the way, buy a co-op in a building where it had been an SRO. I have too many horrible memories. Okay. And I'm not going to get into where they are. I know where they are. But the city is not going to oversee and regulate unless they've got a contract in there for a population. Otherwise, they don't do that. They're private developers. Be like coming into your building. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Thanks,
Okay.
Elaine. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Elaine. We have DJ Folkson and then Elizabeth Rose.
Yeah, I just kind of want to take exception to some of the things I'm hearing. References back to how things were in the 60s with people packing into apartments. The fact is today, the vacancy rate throughout the city is excruciatingly low. There is nowhere for young people to live. I'm in my 30s. I'm fortunate to be able to afford a one-bedroom market rate place in the Upper East Side, packed in there with my wife. I know people in my 20s. I employ people that are in their 20s. They're getting pushed further and further out from the city into Bushwick and beyond. There's no options whatsoever. I keep hearing about SROs as if they are being forced on us, like they're just going to spring up. I think it's just relaxing the rules to allow them to be built should a developer want to. It's not like somebody's going to take a marker to the Upper East Side and say, here's where a transient community, as the term was used, is going to be constructed, and there's going to be a tent city next door. It's all very fear-mongery. This is all just to relax rules to allow more housing to be built where there is no available housing, which includes our community. So I just wanted to say that. I'm going to stop.
Thank you. I won't comment. Okay, Elizabeth Rose.
Thank you, Anthony. I want to, first of all, Anthony, thank you for your presentation. I've been doing a lot of reading on this myself for Adams and my committee, and it's great to hear it from a different perspective because that way you get a fuller picture. I want to first just address some of the comments I've heard, and then I want to talk about sort of the big picture idea, I think, that we really need to address. So, Michelle, Adam and I did check after our last meeting about your 6 apartment per floor rule. That seems to be an urban legend or myth or old wives' tale. There is nothing in regulations that require any number of apartments per floor. It may simply have been, I remember you were talking about this as a specific example of a building. It may have been the best way that the configuration of that building worked, that it had a certain number of apartments per floor. There are clearly requirements for what do you need to make an apartment. But Adam did some checking and he's not found anything that says you have to have a certain number of apartments per floor in an R10A. And Marco's now shaking his head, so I'm sure he will be given an opportunity to address that. I'm also kind of like the last speaker, who I greatly appreciate. I'm kind of baffled by this is what they're designing this to build. No one's telling a developer what they have to build. What they're telling you is what you can build, and what they will build will be dependent on individual market conditions, and what they will build on the Upper East Side is likely to be different than what they will build on the Lower East Side, even in a comparable zoning situation. So if 2 different parts of the city have the same zone, you may still get 2 very different types of buildings or developments based on what the developer thinks that market is looking for. 500 square feet for a studio, not the worst sized apartment in the world. So no one's saying that they're only going to build 500 square foot studios. But what they're saying is you could build a 500 square foot studio. And I spent much of my 20s living in 500 square foot 1 bedrooms. It's not bad. a half floor of a brownstone is a 1-bedroom apartment. That's about 500 square feet. A lot of people find those very attractive. SROs. I grew up on the Upper West Side in the 70s, the West 70s. I did also grow up in the 70s. SROs, the SRO story was the state closed all of its mental health hospitals, and those residents had nowhere to go. That was what drove the creation of all of these SROs on the Upper East and West Sides, were people who desperately needed strong social service support and who were housed in locations that had zero social services support. So as a housing concept, SROs have gotten a really horrible name. I'm not advocating for them, but I will tell you that I grew up in my parents' rooming house. They bought a brownstone that literally housed 17 households, and they ran it as a rooming house where they provided clean sheets once a week and cleaned the bathrooms. That is what I grew up in until my parents ultimately renovated it into a 7-unit apartment building. So it's not the concept, it is the circumstances of the 1970s. There may be reasons and there may be places where an SRO makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying general public, I hope not general public, but there are ways that it might make sense. What we do need are more housing models. And for example, in New York City, in a multi-space, in an apartment, you can only have one unrelated roommate legally. Well, my daughter is a senior in college in the state of Virginia. There was not enough campus housing. She had to move off campus her senior year. And there is a model of housing where apartments are being built around a shared kitchen and living room, and you lease an individual bedroom and bathroom. So you are only responsible for the bedroom that you lease. You are not responsible for the rent of the entire apartment. It does mean that if you can't find a roommate who wants to rent one of those other rooms, that there may be a stranger who gets to rent one of those other rooms, but it's a totally different model of housing that frankly was extremely helpful and valuable. And I think it is a model that is expanding rapidly around the world. And we basically barely have it in New York. I think it sort of exists, but it is a different model. We need to be open to different models. So now I want to get to the big picture idea of what Anthony presented on today, which is, should there be an across the board 20% FAR bonus for building housing that serves populations that have low or restricted income? That's inclusive of low income individuals. It is inclusive of seniors who are generally believed to be on restricted incomes. It may be true for supportive housing needs. There may be other categories, but should there be a 20% FAR bonus to encourage development of more units that serve restricted income populations? And I think as a big idea, and one that could be applied citywide, I think it's a great idea. And that is something that we can be supportive of. What Anthony's presentation did highlight is that there is a missing logic link on how does the additional FAR potentially relate to additional height. So they're proposing additional height on zones that are getting no additional FAR above and beyond what they already have. So R10A, for example, even though that already has a 20% bonus, and there is a height limit defined for that 20% bonus, City of Yes doesn't provide them any additional FAR than they currently have, and yet they're giving them more height. Why? There seems to be a logic disconnect there. is it too difficult to fit in the FAR in the current envelope? Now, take that to the next level and take that down to R8B, where now all of a sudden you're looking at something closer to somebody do the math, 30 over 75. So it's a 30 or 40% height bump for a 20% FAR bump. That is an inconsistent logic. And I think if you want to question or oppose some aspects of this big idea, that is the where to question it. Because if you can fit the FAR into the existing envelope, then why does it need, and the FAR isn't changing, why do they need a height bump? And if you're only increasing the FAR by 20%, can you fit the new FAR into the existing envelope? And, you know, at a maximum, the height increase should only be the same percentage as the FAR increase. And so that's where I think you have some potential real logic. And Anthony, I really appreciate the way you highlighted those differences, because that is not something I had paid attention to or focused on in Adam's and my work for our last meeting.
Sure.
So thank you very much.
Just very quickly, the fact of the matter is that you can pretty much accomplish the full 4.0 well, you can go over 4.0 FAR within that existing envelope. And obviously, if you're only adding 20% to it, you don't need that much more possible bulk. And I think the more conspiratorial minded among us might begin to look at air rights transfers as a source for even more floor area that would allow new buildings to fill up their envelopes, their much bigger envelopes. So I think that I think lurking in the background is something like that, at least in the minds of some of the people who set this up. Adam. But thank you, Elizabeth. That it was a great distillation of, sorry, Adam, great distillation of the big idea, really.
So I'll start first by responding to what Elizabeth brought up, in that the reason I think for the additional height is that because on a narrow street, you already have to do a 15-foot setback. So in order to so it's not a uniform height increase, right? Because we have to step back. So we're losing 15%, we're losing 15 feet on a narrow street. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one of density to height, because that height is being constricted within the envelope of the setback. But touching on that, so one of the things that we addressed in our task force was the fact that there are overbuilt buildings in the R8B, because there used to be an R8 zoning. It wasn't R8B. So when you present something where you say that, oh, now this 105-foot building is going to be entirely out of context, look at all these other short buildings, it's a little bit dishonest, because the R8 zoning was in effect for quite a long time, and there's plenty of buildings that were built that are 10 stories, 12 stories, 14 stories in what is now the R8B. And another point I'll make is that and our community board is consistent in doing this, and I really don't like it when they do it, is that we say that just because a rent stabilized unit is demolished, it is an affordable unit. We don't know that to be the case. If it is a rent stabilized unit below a certain rent, it may be an affordable unit. But is a 6th floor walk up to a senior who can't really traverse stairs well, is that affordable to them? I don't know that we can always use the word affordable unit when we're talking about demolishing a unit that happens to be in a building where there are maybe some rent stabilized apartments. So I would also like to see if we can control our use of the word affordable when talking about demolishing tenement units. And the other thing I was going to bring up was the 6 units per floor. I don't see anywhere in the zoning resolution where that is required. I'm sure when Marco speaks, he can tell us exactly what part of the ZR that is referencing, because we could not find it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I think, and obviously you make a good point about that there are legacy buildings throughout the R8B district that do not conform to the R8B zoning. And obviously that's true. So next, all right. Oh, Juno has not spoken yet, and so she should, and then I think we can go back to Rita, Michelle, and Marco.
Okay, thanks. There's a lot to respond to here, and I just want to go back to the initial topic and say that, I mean, the way I see it, there are 2 main ways for the city to make all units more affordable relatively without spending any money, and that's to allow developers to build taller or to allow them to build smaller. And I think allowing them to build taller is something that I personally support, and I would be very interested in participating in these conversations about, you know, raising the FAR and raising the required height limit. But I think it's also really important to be allowing things like these SROs, or just giving people the option to build them, because then that will also free up more 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms for families as younger people move out. And I'm just saying, if you don't build any more in the Upper East Side, like, the prices are just going to go up and up because the demand isn't going to go down. And personally, once I start working full time, I would much rather live in a 500 or even less square foot apartment here in this neighborhood, which is my home, than to live somewhere super far away in one of the outer boroughs where I have to commute 1.5 hours or more to work. Like, for some people, you can't just assume what other people want and what other people value. So giving developers the freedom to build smaller is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Rita.
All of this has been really an incredible presentation. I don't know enough about FARs or whatever it is, but I do know about human beings, because I was a psych major and a teacher. In presenting this, have people called in experts and found out what happens to the climate when you build higher. What happens if there is a pandemic again, and there will be, and everybody is eating in the same kitchen? Are we helping to encourage to grow life, or are we looking to use a shoehorn and to push things into a hole, a square hole with a round peg? I don't hear that any experts in human living have come into this conversation. We are talking about bricks and mortar, but there are people who are going to live in there. If you're young, maybe you like dormitory living, go live in a dormitory. The point is that, are we taking care of the people for now, for the future? Are we going to assure the health? We keep saying that tall buildings are bad for the climate. Is anybody listening? Or do they think it's not happening because people aren't falling over in the street? And I don't understand, when we come out with a new drug, we test before we put it out. We put it out first and then we test it. That's what's wrong with this. I'm sorry. I absolutely agree with Elaine. I want to see the city be better. You could live in a smaller apartment if you're single. You can't live in a smaller apartment if you have children, and expect for them to grow up correctly. My grandchildren are all in colleges, and what happens in college, as Elizabeth, is everybody's out of classes during the day. In the SROs, people weren't outside, they were inside. So I would like to hear some of the experts talk about what is being proposed. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. We now have Michelle and then Marco, and then I think we might move the agenda. Michelle.
Yeah,
I had
so
my hand
I think I have to defend my street creds here. I lived in a 1-bedroom with 3 people for many, many years. So there, I qualify. The whole discussion, it's one thing to speak, and then it's always amazing to me to learn what other people heard. There's a big difference between what somebody said and then what somebody heard them say. So let me clarify that the issue with the 1-bedrooms, as I thought I made very clear, is that and if this goes to the developers making these decisions, it's a matter of the percentages. In other words, what percentage of a population do they think they need of that particular thing? How many 3-bedrooms do they need? For example, I'll give you an example of the Friedman building, okay? He knew very clearly he had this many 2-bedrooms, this many 3-bedrooms, this many. They did their market research, they're developers. When they build a building, they build to what they think they can sell, which is not necessarily to what the need is. Because, for example, the overwhelming truth on the Upper East Side, at least, is that the taller the building, the lower the density. And that's been the stat. The higher the building, the less apartments. That is true across the board. Everybody is concerned about it, and it's one of the reasons that prompted the city to come up with, an attempt to correct that. And when you're in private development, they can't mandate to the developer, you have to build this many 2s and this many 3s, and they can't. But if you have no height limit, they can't mandate how many. You could put 1 apartment on a floor, 2 apartments, 3, which is what they have been doing. So the higher the building in the Upper East Side, the less people live in them. That has been the case. So now, and in terms of accommodating what people need at different stages of their life, the elderly very often, what happens, revert back to their prior needs. They may be able, they can't take care perhaps of a larger premises. The other side of that, maybe they need a caregiver with them. You can't really determine. However, you do know pretty much who might move into a small apartment. You know, the Normandy, which is lovingly called the Dormandy, is because those apartments are filled with a lot of recent graduates from schools. And as a matter of fact, the building has provided walls that you could move in, and you can create a 3-bedroom apartment from a 2 with a living room that has no window. And I know a million kids who have done that in there. So you know, it's not that it doesn't exist in the city. It does exist in the city. What we're tasked with is how to make sense of this, with the assumption that somebody will listen to us. And that's really what I want to talk about. Does anybody really have a handle on will we be listened to? Because there are studies that have shown that the taller the building, the less eco-friendly it is. This administration seems to be pretty hysterical about that. Hence the legislation 97, all the mandates is going to cost everybody a fortune. Yet if you go higher than 210 or whatever, you're losing heat, you're losing, it's very, very inefficient. So why anybody would promote that, I don't know. If you could satisfy your housing needs within a legitimate, acceptable, livable height limit, there is an advocacy group out there called, they're in favor of human scale development. It's a very good concept, human scale. In other words, you look up, you know, you get your light, you get your air, you get the things that you need. My question, which I think eventually, after we study each of the areas, has to be, what can we really do about it? Who is listening? Marco and I have spoken to city planning. I have spoken to Dan Garodnick. Their philosophy down there is they think height equals housing. We spoke to Liz Kruger. Her office does not think that because of what they are observing on the Upper East Side and other places. We spoke to Rebecca Seawright. She does not think that height means housing. So there are a lot of different opinions here. It depends which science you want to look at. You want to look at the science of compatibility, or do you want to look at what really happens with housing, or do you want to have input, or you want to talk about the economics for developers? You have to let them make money. If they don't make money, they're not building anything of any kind. And while some might giggle about it, a tax base is pretty important, because the more housing you have, you need schools, you need supermarkets. You don't just put more people in a district and have no support services. You need a cleaner store, you need a shoemaker, you need 1,000 things. So now your rent, now your commercial has to be affordable. I believe with our 10A, I believe there's a C19. I shouldn't fool around with these numbers because I'm not sure if I remember them, but I think it's a C19 on the first floor, whatever. It's supportive commercial. All our zoning nerds can speak to that. But the point is, you do get supportive commercial with an R10A. Anyway, that's all to be determined. My question for this group and for the co-chairs is, how will we make ourselves heard? Who can we target that will actually listen? And how much clout do we have to actually ask for the stats? To actually say, how did you come to this decision? I mean, are we entitled to that information? If they want us to comment, I think we should be entitled to that information, especially if we're supposed to offer ideas and commentary. And numerous times, every time I've gone to all of these meetings, the opening statement, this is not a fait accompli. We want to hear from everybody. We value your comments. We're going to take it under advising. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm happy to offer them. Everybody here is happy to offer their, but I would like it to be an informed decision. So if you have some stats to show us where height is the answer, or where 500 square foot apartments with kitchens and bathrooms in the whole are the answer, I'm open. Show it to me. Show it to me. But if a little think tank was sitting around and they were being creative and we don't know what they base their information on, that's very problematic. So those are my questions for next steps after we clarify this and plow through this whole thing, and we will all have our individual opinions. But at the end of the day, I want to know who will listen to us. Can we come up with something for our community, recognizing and hoping that they recognize that not one size doesn't fit all, and that what they call fair share, there are communities out there that have more than their fair share. So anyway, that's where I hope we end up with this, because otherwise it'll be great, we'll all be real knowledgeable, but if we can't affect the end result, we got a real problem. So I'll leave it with that. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Michelle. And Marco, and then I'm going to turn this back. And then of course, Sharon. Yes, I'll turn it over to Sharon. Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. First, let me answer about the quality of housing. Quality of housing, it is something that elevate the standard of living in the city, and this is why all the developers, they go in that direction, and they make more money, obviously, and the standard of living increase. One of them is basically the corridor. In order to obtain some benefits, some reduction of the floor area, 50% in the process, and you must be in compliance with this regulation, it is required to have a window in the corridor. So any part of the building, you have to provide in the corridor. If you put the vertical circulation in the center of the lot, so you can have 14 in the center, and then you have 28 in the front and 20 in the back. You have to have windows on the apartments. So the vertical circulation do not have a windows now. So I have, as a matter of fact, I have one client that I break almost my head, try to figure it out. Where do I put a window in a lot of 25 by 100? And it came out that basically it limits completely the number of apartments in each floor. And the number of apartments on each floor is according with the vertical ventilation. And you know, Anthony, very well, that there is some special regulations in the building code that you cannot have a dead end longer than a specific dimension. In some cases, no more than 75 feet. Mm-hmm. And that is required. And this is part of the design that they impede to put more apartments, because the idea is to create less density on the buildings, and that's the developer building. So now, answer that part. It leads me to the point that we had to start discussing. I'm sorry, whoever brings in the direction of SROs, I think they are wrong. We are the Upper East Side, the developer on the Upper East Side, they don't care about SROs. They don't care affordable housing. The only thing they care is demolish affordable housing, build tall, large apartment for wealthy people. That is the pattern on the Upper East Side. Don't come with the SROs. The SROs, they're never going to build in the Upper East Side. They can build in the other neighborhoods, yes, but not in the Upper East Side. They prefer to go in that direction because they make more money. Why? Because it's a very poor regulations on the density. The density that you can build zero, that I already explained about zero density. Most of the developers in our community build between 24% to 50%, when in reality they should build 100%. If they build 100%, now we're talking about SROs. But the developers, they don't hunt in that direction because they have a lot of market, a lot of clients, a lot of wealthy residents that they are targeting to them. And the Upper East Side, they want to put basically wealthy people. And you see any building in the Upper East Side, walk on the avenues, All of them are for luxury building, nothing for middle income and nothing for low income housing, even though that they demolish affordable housing. And that is the bottom line. Our discussion it should be in that direction, because we have to follow what the developers want to do. Because if we don't catch them, they can do whatever they want, and they take the money and they run away from our neighborhood. So my first advice is, let's go control the density of the buildings, the minimum density. We control the highest density. Now let's go control the lowest density. And there is a regulation. The regulation is R10A. They regulate with the height and they regulate completely the density, because the developer are forced to do the right thing, to build luxury, to build middle income, and to build affordable housing. If they demolish, and yes, we can give you something more to the developer to make it even more attractive. And our discussion it should be in that direction. Forget about the SROs. Forget about that. I don't want to see the toilet at the end of the corridor. No, the developer, they're not going to build that. They may going to build in another neighborhood, yes, but we had to target our problems. We had to tailor our ideas and function what the developer are doing, and we had to work with them, and we had to tell them clearly, please do the right thing. In any event, remember one thing: the developer just follow what is the law, and I didn't find no developer they do any unlawful things. Everything is by law. So who has to be involved in this part is our decision makers. These are the people that has to be present in that part, because those are the people that say, yes, do that. And we had to organize ourselves and come with a resolution saying, listen, we want to have something reasonable. We propose something, because with the city of Yes and the way that it is off completely of our neighborhood. They wanted to destroy. In reality, what they want to do is basically is to gentrify. They want to remove all. Rita is thinking that how you going to build affordable housing. No, the developers and the idea of the city is how to remove poor people from our neighborhood. That's what it is. And that's we have to stop, because at least we have to protect our neighbors that live right here in our community. I think that is basically, I don't want to go extend anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco.
Yes.
There you are. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I just wanted to sum up and also to, before I turn it over to Elizabeth, I am a former president, tenant association president, as well as a former vice president, voted twice, representing 3,000 units across 5 separate buildings. There's not a stairwell in those 5 buildings that I have not traversed. There's not a single door in which I have not been in front of. And so this discussion regarding housing really is, I think, very pertinent, and I'm looking and monitoring the people on this call. And we started out at 27, we're now at 26. We've only had one person leave. Everyone has remained in particular for this discussion, and thank you so much for the presentation, Andy. I'm conflicted because I do agree with Elizabeth that we need more housing models. And also, I agree with DJ that there needs to be a flexibility and an understanding that this is about a relaxation of rules. because all of us, including me, as a former tenant association president and a former vice president of the association, elected. Sometimes, and this is for each of you as well, you walk by people who are homeless and your heart just pours out. You know that we're at a point where it's desperate, not just for the homeless, but for seniors and young people as well. I think we're only going to be able to move forward if we have that diversity of housing. I know that SROs have a negative connotation. I think we ought to have them. It's the first time for me to have heard from someone that actually had experience with housing single individuals. And I appreciate that. I appreciate Elizabeth for sharing that information with us. I mean, it was really good to hear. At the end of the day, I think that we'll be successful with being flexible. And Juno, I want you to know that you have come into a meeting talking about building heights and that you do think that buildings should be taller. Well, I want you to know that you have stepped into a hornet's nest. We're very much, I think, focused on having building heights, but we'll have to find some middle ground between, perhaps what you're thinking and perhaps what we have today. Because it's that middle ground that I think is going to move us forward. We cannot be seen as a community that says no, no, no. And so I very much appreciated hearing your comments. I may not 100% agree with you, but I think that there's something there that we might want to incorporate in our discussion moving forward, in particular with our position regarding the 210 height limit that we have at Community Board 8, here on Community Board 8, I should say. Revisiting something that was created a few years ago, before the pandemic, before we have an even greater housing emergency, which is just absolutely phenomenal to me, than we did several years ago. And so we have great minds here on this call, and it's been absolutely phenomenal and fascinating listening to everyone. And I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation, because there's no one on this call that believes that housing is unimportant, that it should not be a priority at all. And so going forward, to wrap up and really to follow up Michelle's question, like, where do we go from here? How do we proceed? And will they listen to us? And we'll be able to answer some of those questions, and other people will be able to chime in. But if I were to hazard a guess here, and you'll forgive me for reiterating, I think that will be listened to if there is some degree of flexibility overall, because we're really in a very desperate situation right now. That's it.
Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to Elizabeth for the second item on our agenda.
Are you turning it over to me?
I sure am.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure. Yes, I think we should probably make this brief before half the audience dies of starvation and right in front of us. The second item we wanted to discuss was there are several proposals out there, either to increase the FAR limits or to eliminate them. And for those members of the audience who are not familiar with FARs, floor area ratio is what it is, and it's the number of times you multiply the square footage of your lot to get the square footage, allowable square footage of your building. And the higher the FAR, obviously, the more density you get. And I will just point out and then let people make comments. The FAR that we have now, the FAR limit, we are the most densely populated district in the most densely populated city in this entire country. Under the current FAR limit, that's what we are. We aren't there because we have double everybody else's FAR. We're under what everybody's under. I think that we have to bear that in mind. And the real, I think, dangers that one can get with this is in those zoning districts where there is no height limit, and adding zoning lot mergers that all of us are allergic to, you can get, and we have now, 20 FAR buildings. You'll see what you are, with no increase in the density at all. You get there by doing that. So if you want to know what's going to, well, you know, we can find you a few horrible buildings to look at. And after those words, I will turn it over to anyone who wishes to comment or question, and my co-chairs for their opinions. Marco.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Oh, sorry.
Elizabeth,
No.
Can I share some information?
Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. I'm
Sure.
sorry, Elizabeth. Yeah.
No, I think I did something wrong. Okay, can you see the chart? Is anybody can see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is 12 developments on the Upper East Side. On the Upper East Side, the 1, 2, 3, the 4 column is the total floor area ratio that they're supposed to have it. Now, the deal in the application on the Department of Buildings, next column, that is what the applicants filed, and it was approved because there was either was the zoning incentive, the 2 extra floor area, or the transfer of the air rights. On the yellow column, you can see it. Only one development, the first one, which is in contextual district, which is have 210 feet high, have a floor area ratio of 1197. The rest have a floor area ratio between 13.22 to 22.8. That is the floor area ratio because of the transfer of the air rights. Now, if you see almost the column where it says percentage, almost at the end where it said 88, 88% is for the density that the development in a contextual district, R10A, I'm sorry. In that part, this is the percentage that the developer are building between 55 to 0%. 0%, I already explained it, but 15% is the minimum. So what I'm trying to say is the higher the floor area ratio, the lower the density, the less apartment and the luxury building you are building. That is a fact. That is the information that I get of all developments in the Upper East Side. So if somebody said, let's go increase the floor area so we can have more housing, agree. But what the developer is doing, they don't do that. They build luxury housing only. And everybody is saying that we have to build all types of housing to create opportunities for all. This is not the case. For the person that just finished college and they want to finish, unless you have make an income of $500,000 or more, then you're in our community. If you don't make that income, you're out. So the point is, the density is no control for anything except in contextual district control very well the density. As you see on the blue road, almost at the end, you see 88%. The developer is forced to build, and they build luxury, they build middle income housing, and they build affordable housing. I think this is a good formula to move forward. We cannot allow just only said, let's go increase the high because we're gonna produce housing. No, because there is no control in the density. They control just only in the maximum density. They don't control in the minimum density. And that is what we see in the Upper East Side. That is the pattern, that is the trend, and that is kind of a continuum. Because the Upper East Side is very attractive for the developers, and the developers follow whatever it is in the zoning resolution. So increasing the floor area, increasing height is not equal to produce more housing. Is equal to produce less housing, luxury housing only, and create gentrification.
Marco, just for clarification, are you saying, because I thought I heard you say that for each of these, the FAR was increased because of the transfer of development rights?
Right, they bought the air rights.
Okay.
This is where they went so high. Otherwise, they cannot go more than 12.
Okay, now I have one question. If there are no transfer development rights involved, and if the FAR was increased, would the same theory hold, that there would be less housing?
Well, if you don't control the density, of course. And the idea is basically the RA 10.8 control everything. You don't need to control the density at all. By itself, control everything. And that is a good policy to find something that this is, as a matter of fact, this is a developer that did. It's not my proposition. It's not my ideas. It's a developer they propose that. They build and they doing. Let me give you the location, 86 and York Avenue. It's right there. You can go, you can see. It's a tall building. I think a reasonable tall building. But the production of housing is fair. They produce luxury, good. They produce middle income, good. And they produce affordable housing. As a matter of fact, they demolished 32 affordable housing and revealed 31. I think is excellent. I think this is a good model that we have to follow. We can improve, we can do something. Otherwise, the developer, they can do whatever they want. As you see it, one developer built 0, so no density, because he's hunting for profits. And we cannot blame them. If the zoning resolution is not properly prepared, so he can do whatever he wants, because he has knowledgeable advisors and he knows how to profit very well. And that's his right. And he will keep doing that until we stand up with some proposal that actually do something nice or something positive. Oh, I'm sorry, to create opportunities for all. In the case that I presented right there, I have all the information about that, by the way. It's just only, this is the final analysis that I did. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Marco.
Marco.
Thank you. The next one, sorry, I haven't got the right
Elizabeth
list. There we
Rose.
go. By right, Elizabeth Rose is the next.
Yes.
Elizabeth, for you.
Thank you.
And not to bother you, but I hope that because of the late hour, we can all now condense, be a little more succinct.
I always try. Thank you, Elizabeth. In terms of the raising of the overall FAR cap from 12 to something higher, I have two thoughts. My first is that this is a proposal that is very specifically targeting the wealthier neighborhoods of Manhattan. So unlike the last proposal that we were discussing, where everything from R6 to R10 would have a 20% bonus available for the inclusion of affordable housing or for income restricted housing. This is raise the cap from 12 to something else, only affects those neighborhoods and districts that already have housing that is built up to an FAR of 12 or have zones that have an FAR of 12. And for the most part, and I'm sure there are exceptions, and I'm sure there are parts of the city that make an FAR of 12 available that are not luxury neighborhoods. But I believe that this burden is predominantly focused on already high, dense, expensive neighborhoods. And because it doesn't affect all neighborhoods equally, I oppose this. Now, wiser head than mine actually had a different angle or explanation of what might potentially be happening with the FAR cap that made a lot more sense to me. And that was that in order to allow more commercial buildings, which have been built at a higher FAR than 12, to be converted to residential, that is the purpose of the FAR cap removal. And if that's the case, and so maybe now my answer would be, okay, so let's bifurcate this. That in order to convert existing non-residential real estate to residential, is it appropriate to allow buildings built at a higher FAR than 12 to be converted? To which I could say, yes, that I could buy into, that makes a ton of sense. Do I want to see greater density allowed as of right without transfer of air rights across the board in many neighborhoods, inclusive of ours, that already have a fair amount zoned to the full at 12 FAR? No, I would not like to see that. So I think there needs to be a segmented response to the idea of lifting the 12 FAR cap. Thank you.
Thank you. Focused legislation rather than, everybody gets it. Sherry?
I would like to speak to the quality of life. I know as I walk around the Upper East Side, you cannot see any sunlight. And this is especially true in the eastern part of the neighborhoods where there is no limit on height. There is a criteria where the shade factor is taken into account in many cities more vigorously than here. I remember there was something about one of the buildings going to have shade on Central Park, and that was an issue. But I've never heard that discussion as we talk about the height of buildings. I remember not that long ago there was a big controversy about developers putting their HVAC systems in the middle of the building so they can get more height. And when you go to rent or buy an apartment, you pay more for the height. So developers want to make it as tall as possible. But again, as somebody who walks a lot and would like to see some sunlight other than the strip between two blocks, we need to keep that in mind from an environmental point of view. And again, just quality of life. People need sunshine, and we shouldn't have to go over to Central Park to see the light of day. And I think, yeah, people need housing, but we live here, and there are millions of people who live here, and that should be taken into consideration too, because sometimes too high is too high. And again, I support. I know Sharon said we need to be flexible, but 210 is what had been going on the western side of the streets, and I think that's an appropriate height because you can get sunlight through there. Thank you. And again, Anthony, that was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Juno is now our next speaker.
Yeah, thanks. I thought what Elizabeth Rose said was very interesting, and later on I'd love to see the information about like the commercial converting to residential, but that's sort of unrelated to what I'm going to talk about next. I was just wondering, this is addressed to Marco, if there was some way to advocate for both the city of Yes for housing and also for density limits and limits on the demolishment of affordable housing altogether.
Should I answer, Elizabeth?
Yes, Marco, go ahead.
Okay, so I think we have a position of the community board 210. That is our position. So everybody is under that umbrella. So now the issue is we have an application that the districts that go in that direction, and city planning they reject that part, which is there is no good argument. But if not, it's something similar you saw in the presentation that the building at 86, you can walk by 86 and York Avenue. You see it's very tall, and I think it's tall enough. And this building has 230 feet tall. So this is to give you an idea how tall it should be. It means because it's on a wide street in that case, and the avenues are wide street, so they allow to have more potential to make the buildings taller. And my advice is the best way is always we have to talk to our reps, and our reps they had to follow with city planning, explaining what is our concern. We are not opposed to build housing at all. We would like to have housing. The only thing is, let's go build housing for all. Let's go give opportunities for all, rich, middle income, and poor, because all of us deserve to be here. And in addition to that, let's go protect our neighbors, those people that are living right here. And what the city of Yes is doing is pushing away those people. It gentrificate, it creates just only for wealthy people. And I think it's wrong, that policy. Because once you have a rich neighborhood and a poor neighborhood, you create social resentment. And social resentment, you see with the movement, the Black Lives Matter, it will create like that. You're not going to resolve with billions of dollars, because when there is social resentment, that is wrong. Create a rich neighborhood, a poor neighborhood is wrong. I think probably that may answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Now, somebody called DJ Folkston.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you. I'm still here. Just a couple of points on the FAR cap, I think, that haven't been mentioned. I think everyone on here is probably familiar, but this is a state rule, not a city rule, that has been imposed for a long time, and they kind of have their boot on our necks. So to some of the points that have been made, lifting the FAR cap, again, is just removing a limitation. It's not going to immediately lead to super tall buildings everywhere. But some of the arguments I've seen in favor of lifting the cap that I found kind of most compelling, and I'm sure others have seen this, the Post has reported on it recently. A lot of the kind of famous, very classic New York buildings that line Central Park on Central Park West and Fifth Avenue that people love could not legally be built today because of the FAR cap and because of the way that they're built and the density. And conversely, some of the super tall glass towers, especially on Billionaires Row, were kind of stitched together just to get in under the FAR cap. So removing the cap may allow actually shorter buildings with more units throughout a lot of the city, which is something that people have expressed a lot of concern about, certainly on the Upper East Side, where we're getting tall buildings with not that many units. And I do agree with people who are saying that. So I'm in favor of lifting the FAR cap. It's something that the legislature's been talking about last year and talking about this year. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, so it might be a moot point. Certainly not in this year's budget talks, but I think it would be a good decision for the legislature to take.
Okay. If there, anyone else want to have Anthony or Sharon
No,
You
I'm
want,
good.
Anthony wants to have a word. And
Oh.
then maybe we'll go to new business and old business and go home. Okay.
No,
Anthony, you're there.
Yes. I think, thank you, Elizabeth. I think the other Elizabeth had a good point about perhaps bifurcating the FAR cap in the sense that Midtown is much bigger than the Upper East Side. I do think that as she pointed out, excuse me, this is aimed at the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side. And I also think in particular, because so much of both the Upper East Side, the western half of the Upper East Side, all of which, and the, excuse me, a lot of the Upper West Side are in fact height restricted, not floor area ratio restricted. And since in fact, it appears that the City of Yes for Housing's main thrust is to begin to move away from floor area ratio and move more toward building envelope, which is to say height as the determining factor. It seems to me that the floor area ratio cap runs counter to what the city is trying to do. Just a thought as we start to think about this. Thanks.
Okey doke. Is there any old business? Any new business?
Michelle has her hand raised.
And Peggy.
Move to adjourn.
Who's had a
Michelle,
Does
move
Peggy
to
have something?
adjourn.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Anthony, for your excellent presentation. It was quite
thank you.
informative. Discussion was also illuminating, but you did a yeoman's job and it was most appreciated.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Harold Moore?
Yeah, I was told to come here for a liquor license issue.
No, wrong meeting. Liquor license.
I'm afraid you're the wrong store.
It's Street Life. I have no idea when they meet. Does anybody know?
Harold,
maybe Kevin, do you know when Street Life?
Yeah.
Harold, this is the wrong meeting. The next Street Life meeting is on March the 5th. You can find that information on CB8M.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Harold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh dear. Since there's no old business or no new business, has somebody
Michelle's
got
already met.
Michelle?
I think Sherry is frantically waving to call for an adjournment. Yes, she is. Any objection?
Motion
No.
to adjourn.
We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Okay.